You're listening to the Emissary Authors Podcast, where we help faith-driven founders and entrepreneurs tell the stories that matter. This episode was made possible in part by the Emissary Author Workshops and our title of the week, The Hope of War, from Emissary author Larry Cripps. Go to publishwithemissary.com/workshops and thehopeofwar.com for more details. Well, it's a very special edition of the Emissary Authors Podcast today. My name is Paul Edwards, and I'm joined, as usual, by my friend and my partner in crime, Jason Todd. Jason, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Lots of wisdom here, and excited about this idea of the holistic you, which is the book from Rabbi Daniel and Susan Lapin. You know them, I understand, Paul.
I've had the privilege of interviewing Rabbi Lapin in the past and corresponding with him a little bit over the years to learn more, and it's really enriched my own journey with the Bible. And so we are excited to welcome America's rabbi, noted rabbinic scholar, popular international speaker, and best-selling author. And today we get 2 for 1. We get Rabbi Daniel Lapin and the legendary Susan Lapin, co-authors of The Holistic You, on the Emissary Authors Podcast. Rabbi and Susan, welcome to the show. So good to have you.
Thank you very much,
Great
Paul
to be
and
here.
Jason. And just a minor correction. I'm not sure it's as correct to say you're getting 2 for 1 as to say you're getting the whole one.
The whole one.
Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah, we got to dig into that one.
well, I was excited for this conversation because you co-authored a book and you served together in your work, and that I think couples very well with this idea of the holistic you in terms of husband-wife relationships. I find it fascinating. So maybe we could dig into that too. So I love that you bring that out. The whole one. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. No, because if you interview only one of us, you get half the story.
Yeah,
that's true.
So, Rabbi, you've written several best-selling books now, and you've been on the national stage for quite a while. You have an enormous community that you've been building, the Happy Warriors, which I'm a proud part of. And, you reach people every week with your podcast, and you've written on business secrets from the Bible, Thou Shalt Prosper. So now along comes this message, which I'm very familiar with, but I don't know that the audience has a tremendous amount of familiarity with it. And our audience is authors. And so we'd like to speak a little bit on the context of integrating all of these 5 F's as and when you choose to write a book. And I just bet you have some wisdom and insight to offer on that. But I'd like to start with why this message and why now?
Our kids used to joke when people would ask them, what does your father do? They never had an answer. And they would say, could you be an accountant or a lawyer, like a plumber, whatever? But I don't know what my father does. Do you have an hour? I'll sit and explain it to you. And that's because we would be teaching, or he would be teaching over the years. And sometimes it was finance, a book like Thou Shalt Prosper, which is how to increase your income. Other times it was marriage. Other times it was on building a community. It was all based on the Bible. And of course, the Bible is the picture of everything. So all those things come together, but it's very hard to speak about them in 30-second sound bites.
Yeah.
And that's what this book is really. It's based on the Hebrew word shalom, which people know as peace or hello or goodbye, is actually the same word as completion. And the idea is that we are complex human beings and we don't just have one facet of our life. And so we need to put them all together and, more importantly, to integrate them. And that's really tough because it's very hard to put together being a good business professional and being a good spouse and being a good parent and being a good friend and being a good member of the community. I mean, you're out of hours by the time, at this point, the day's over and you've only hit 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah.
So that was really the idea behind the book, is to work on how do we integrate those.
And we were also very struck on, the standard question, whether you're filling out forms for real estate purchase or whether you're in casual conversation with people. Very often the question comes up of, what is your net worth? And it's an important number. But we realized that people were confusing their real worth with their net worth. And so if somebody successfully creates a very significant net worth, but in the process loses friends, loses family, is that considered a good life? Is that considered success? I don't think anybody would say yes, which reminds me of this lady.
Last week in Business Insider newsletter, they profiled a woman, Gwen Mertz, and she's in her early 30s now, but she was following a program which the idea was put away as much money as you can so you can retire early.
Yeah.
What
And
is the FIRE?
it's FIRE.
It's an acronym, right?
It's an acronym. Financial independence, retire early.
Yeah.
And she did that. And it just spoke so much to the holistic you, because she spoke about along the way, she lost certain things, such as pursuing romance, because she found she was so focused on saving money that she wasn't able to deal with a person who didn't have exactly the same view that she did. And she spoke about living in a living space where she had literally no room to pursue her hobbies, because she bought a place, but then rented out most of it to other people. So she wasn't able to do those things that we call faith, meaning that fed her spirit, her soul. Most interestingly, she realized that she actually hurt her financial bottom line. Even though she saved something like $200,000 in a few years.
By the time she was 27, she had $200,000.
She realized that because she wouldn't participate in networking activities with coworkers. And then when it comes to a promotion, people turn to the people they know. And she sort of had isolated herself, so that even in terms of her job and her career and her professional life, she'd actually hindered her financial future a little bit by being so focused on just one aspect, saving. That was what she was focused on. And it was a fascinating interview.
And then we noticed some of the fascinating figures on the number of friends that men have. Now, this is, of course, not applicable to women, because even today, where there has been a significant deterioration, women still have many more friends. And we actually have studies where we ask guys, please list the names of your friends. And we say to them, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that it's not going to take you nearly as long as you think. And the bad news is it's not going to take you nearly as long as you think.
Right.
And in 1960, guys would speak of having 30 plus friends. Once we'd clarified what it is, it's not relatives, it's not people you owe money to, it's people who'd come out to the airport to pick you up if you were stuck, people who take your phone call or return it quickly. So back in the 60s, but that's 60 years ago, people had over 30 friends. As recently as 1999, people were still listing 14, 15 friends on average, men, not people, men. And now in 2022 are the latest figures that we've got, men are listing 4 to 5. Now, that's a very significant drop.
Yeah.
And we can obviously discuss reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that, and there are many, I want to stress this is an area, but one of the things that's happened is that men are placing more and more needs upon their female partner. And they're expecting her to be their best friend and all the friend they need. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so little by little, all this work began to lead to an understanding of the 5 fundamental foundations of life. Family and friendship are 2 separate ones. I may have a wonderful spouse, but I still need friends.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of I heard the old comedian Bill Cosby joke about that one time. He said, your wife is not your friend, right? You could get a friend just by being a nice person, but a wife is special. It's a completely different category. But, what I was thinking about as you said that, Rabbi, was, Jason and I often tell prospective authors that we work with, look, you really need to have a support system if you're going to get this project done. Because, right, Jason joked that I can show my book to my mom, and my mom is always going to love what I do. But she's not really going to give me an objective perspective that says, hey,
there's a limited number of copies she's going to buy.
Right. Exactly. And you're not going to get that perspective, right? That objective view that says, hey, this needs some work. You're really lagging on communicating some of these ideas. So, but Jason, you want to add to that before
there are things I'd much rather hear from a friend than from my wife. And those are probably the things that Susan would much rather not be the one to have to tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, just to touch on this idea of male friendship, there are certain ways that a guy can talk to a guy that he will never accept, from perhaps his wife.
And if he does, it would damage the marriage.
It very well could. Absolutely. Now, you talked about it at the outset. Hey, what does your dad do? And it was sort of a complicated question, and how much we want, as people, to see things in very simple terms. Like, he's an accountant, and that's like, okay, great. Suddenly I know all about accounting, when in fact, I think what you're uncovering with these is that there's a lot of interconnectedness between the various roles that we play, and one sort of moves into the next. It's like, I think it's a pretty common theme nowadays to talk about, well, that's just business. It's not personal. It's like, well, that's not true, because we are holistic beings, and we didn't just like take off our personal hat and then stick on our business hat and go, hey, nothing touches me. What have you found when you were in your research about what people are struggling with, and how it was 5 F's. How your 5 F's help them make more sense of living a full life.
Yeah. Well, perhaps the most important aspect of what you raise is that people think what I need in life is balance. So you'll hear stories. Recently, we came across a very successful person, extremely successful. He left a lot of money by his parents, married a lovely wife, and he started talking to a therapist. And it was from the therapist we heard part of the story that he really has it in for his father. He really has it in for his dad. What's the problem? And he went on and on and on with the therapist. What a bad person his dad was. Turns out his dad didn't come to his school soccer games. Now, soccer's not football. In America, soccer's, it's just not of the same importance. And so we think, oh, that's really terrible. He didn't go to it. But look at what the man did for him. And then we hear guys are saying, well, I always leave work on time for my kids' baseball game or little league game or whatever it is. And then you wait and see, you know what? You live a very privileged and fortunate existence. If you can always put a silly children's game as a bigger priority than taking care of business, you got an interesting kind of life. What would be far more valuable is to spend a little time with your kid and explain to him why there's a big difference between real life, running a business, and playing football or baseball in little league. And I'm perfectly happy to pay for your school tuition and pay for you to get a bat or whatever else you need. And I'm delighted you're learning from good coaches how to play. But the idea that I have to be there to watch you, that's infantile on your part and my part. It's a silliness.
Yeah.
So part of it was sort of people think, well, I need balance. I've got to figure out, do I miss an important work meeting in order to be a kid? But we realize that's not nearly the whole story. The whole story is much more complex. And that is that it is not necessarily either or. What we want to do, clarify and explain and lay out for people, is the way in which when I take care of friends, the friends dimension of my life, I'm also at the same time enhancing the finance and the friendship. And when I take care of the friend, I'm enhancing the finance and the family and the fitness. And when I take care of friends, when I take care of health and fitness, that's also impacting my finances.
Yeah.
And when I take care of family, that impacts friend. And that was the key thing to understand. It's not that these are separate baskets in my life. These are not silos, but they're a complex, integrated system, and very similar in the sense to a car, where if I get really fantastic brakes and I install the best premium ceramic disc Brembo brakes, and then I buy a superb W10 engine from BMW, and I try and assemble what's going to be the best car in the world, and it doesn't work. It's not a good car at all. A $30,000 Kia is going to be a superior car because I may have bought the best components, but they're not designed to work with one another. They're not an integrated system.
I like that analogy a lot. The analogy I've heard before is like pizza. So, what toppings you want on your pizza, what proportions would you like those toppings in? And there are certain ways of building a pizza. And if you don't build it right, if you don't put your crust on the bottom, it's all going to fall apart. It's not pizza, it's casserole. Yeah. But I think what you're drawing on that analogy of the car is much more powerful, because that last statement there are certain things that are not designed to fit together. And no matter what tinkering you want to do, it's not going to work, or it's not going to work well. And people are going to look at you and go, well, that doesn't work. And you'd be like, yeah, but I'm trying. I'm figuring it out. It's my thing's like, yeah, maybe not. So these pieces that fit together in your book, how do you address those various pieces and the decision-making process for what people, and I'm going on a limb here, but what people remove from their lives, what people add to their lives to create a system that works for them?
Well, one of the things we did, the final part of the book, is we have a column called Ask the Rabbi that we have been running for many years now, and we get questions from people. The final section of the book is actually, I don't remember how many, but quite a number of those questions to try to give exactly that, the practical guidance, where people are writing in and saying, how do I do this? And depending on what it is. But as an example, we're not, when we say family in the book, that family is very large. It's including your parents and your grandparents and siblings and nieces, nephews, and it also includes a spouse and children. I think in our life right now, and it's shocking, the number of people who will now, first of all, are not married, are not planning on getting married at ages where people used to be married. But secondly, even if they are getting married, are saying, well, I don't want children. They're making decisions. I mean, it's kind of shocking. People are even having surgeries when they're 19 years old. That makes it impossible for them to have a child, which is a little odd to make that kind of life decision at such a young age. So I think we have very myopic views. And today we're very focused on today, right? Don't tell me about someone's life 100 years ago. And they did not live the way I think a person, they didn't think the way I think a person should think today. So let's get rid of that statue, and that person is no good. And I don't have an eye on the future because I'm not going to have children. That's a very myopic way of living. And we're not saying, look, you've got to get married at 10 years old, or you have to have children when, but we are saying that as certainly for an adult. And again, we're not fans of I'm an adolescent at 43. We think you miss out on an awful lot of life when you think that, but it's happening. Everything's moving later. We don't expect 18-year-olds to be mature today. We used to. What's happened biologically? Has something changed? We don't do that.
On June the 6th, 1945, 18-year-olds stormed the beaches of Normandy.
And so we're not saying, you know what, you need to get married while you're in college and before you have a profession and at 18. But we are saying have it in mind. Have an entire picture of your life, because you know what? How you behave when you're 18, if you're thinking, wow, in the future, I want a spouse, in the future, I want children, it changes what you might do at 18. You certainly don't have the idea of, well, I can get drunk every night because who cares? I'm young.
Yeah.
And that's true for business now as well, in a way that it didn't used to be, because when that video of you surfaces, when you go for a job interview, all of a sudden you should have had in mind that you actually wanted to be respected by your community. And you wanted to be respected by your employer in future years.
Yeah.
So it's really largely a question of having it all in mind, even though you obviously are going to focus on certain areas at different times in your life. Yeah. Even fitness, the truth is, a 25-year-old is in good shape. If you haven't done something to put yourself in bad shape, most 25-year-olds are in good shape. If you're aware of aging and you're aware, well, this isn't going to last forever, then you set certain things in place for the future, even though you may not have to focus on it right now.
Yeah.
I'd say also that a good example of where faith comes into these 5 Fs is because automatically and intuitively, a majority of people would probably say that faith and finance are incompatible. After all, everybody knows it's harder for a rich man to get to heaven than a camel or whatever. I don't know the exact line, but the love of money is the root of all. Everybody knows those things. So you kind of got to choose. Do you want to love God or do you want to love money? And it's going to be one or the other. So the general media, from time to time, I've noticed, has a proclivity to conflate poverty with piety.
Yeah.
And they'll often speak of disparagingly as religious rednecks, without 2 cents to rub together. And so when I find myself speaking to many mainstream audiences, and I speak about high net worth investment conferences that I've spoken at, entirely Bible believers, I get looks of utter incomprehension, because the presumption is that faith and finance do not go together. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because one of the tendencies of secularism, and we can certainly again watch it in the progress of the United States of America over the last 60 years, and that is that secularism tends to contract a timeline for people. And so what a lot of people are unaware of is that when the Muslim armies were defeated at the gates of Vienna in 1683, that was on September the 11th.
Yeah.
And when the Ottoman fleet was defeated in 1571 in the Bay of Lepanto, that was October the 7th.
Yeah.
Religious Muslims have long memories. Religious Christians have long memories, not in the way of selecting dates for destructive actions, but a sort of awareness. Many of my Christian friends or intuitively think, well, what would Jesus do? Well, what's that relevant? I mean, it's 2,000 years. It's very relevant, because my timeline is expansive. I see the past and the future as well as the present. Jews, Moses is alive today as he was 3,000 years ago. And similarly, as far as the future is concerned, I don't want to trigger politically sensitive people in the audience, so don't regard this as a proclamation of anything. Rather, it's simply an interesting demographic reality, and that is that the whole idea of centering abortion as a litmus test for one of the political parties is basically an acknowledgement that the future is much less important than the present.
Yeah.
Now, in business, anybody who is successful in business knows that past and future are even more important than present. In fact, the way we explain it in the book is how the present is not a time, it's an action that converts future to past. It's an instant of action that converts future to past. And so if you can't see a timeline that runs smoothly from 10 years ago to a year ago to today to 10 years' time, it's going to be very difficult for you to make accurate projections. What sort of products should you be doing in your research and development department? What sort of financial set-asides should be put in place? And if you've got a good CFO and he's looking at it, again, if he's a person who has an understanding intuitively of past and future as well as of present, you've got a gem. You've got somebody who's worth more than somebody who only functions intuitively in the present. So incorporating faith in terms of gaining a more comprehensive and precise understanding of what time really is, it's hard to think of anything more useful.
No.
I think where that connects with me is that one of the decisions that we've made at Emissary is to focus our efforts on working with faith-based authors. And not that the topic that they're dealing with and writing about has to be faith-based, but it provides a framework of definitions and language, which, and I want to say that faith is deeper than language, but when we make decisions, if we're operating as faith, as part of that decision-making process, sometimes we're going to come to different decisions. And there's an incompatibility if we're using different languages, different definitions. And therefore, the business, it's not going to, working with that individual is not going to be as smooth. And it seems that the same principle is true as when people are dealing with the holistic you, your life. There are certain things that you have to deal with that are not compatible with one another. How do you walk people through these incompatibilities and invite them to, it sounds like, take responsibility for their futures?
Well, faith is a good example. And here we have to confess to you that really the faith pillar should have been called the spiritual pillar.
But the 4 F's and 1 S just didn't ring the right way.
Just didn't work. And the reason we say that is because faith generally means some kind of relationship with God. And this book is usable whether you fall into that category or whether you are a secular person. And what we're in, I'd say the sort of main section of what faith is all about is the spiritual. What is spiritual? Spiritual is not equivalent to religious or godly or pious. Spiritual is, as Paul will have heard me say many times already, is nothing more than things that cannot be measured in a laboratory. And so loyalty, integrity, persistence, optimism, all these things that are really much more important than how much a person weighs. These are, if you're hiring somebody, what you primarily want to know are the spiritual things. And alas, we cannot measure them. If we had an instrument that could measure integrity, there's not an HR department in the world that wouldn't buy it from us at any price.
No.
And so spiritual factors are hugely important. And if, you're in business, and we believe that almost everybody who doesn't hold a government job or is not a Supreme Court justice is in business, then one of the things you have to be aware of is how many of the decisions that people make about how to spend their money are made on spiritual, not physical bases. And I'll just give you one quick example out of 100 I could give you, and that is clothing. The utilitarian purpose of clothing is really very simple. Keep you warm and that's protected, warm and protected. If you're working in if you're walking through a thorny area, that's all that clothing is for. What about covering up your genitals? Well, that's not a physical need.
Yeah.
My pet chimpanzee is really quite comfortable exposing himself in all kinds of disturbing ways. He's not bothered by it. And if we are nothing more than sophisticated chimpanzees, we should have no need whatsoever. Dignity? What's dignity? You can't measure dignity. Is that a physical? No, it's spiritual. The best clothing I own is my work overalls. I don't know if you know them. They cost me $14 at Walmart. You step into the left leg, you step into the right leg, you sort of shrug back and get one arm through, and you shrug back and get the other arm through. Then you lean down and you grab a big fat brass zipper near your left knee, and you pull it up to your right shoulder. And in less time than it took me to describe the process, I'm fully dressed. It's cheap, it's economical, it's practical, best clothing in the world.
You're not wearing it.
And I'm not wearing it. And
still haven't seen that speaking engagement in your overalls yet, Rabbi.
We haven't, and yet I really should, to make the point. And so, just as one example, if you're in the clothing business, you really better know that people buy clothing for spiritual reasons, not for physical reasons. And that's when we speak about the faith section. We are providing a vast 30,000-foot view of the role of the spiritual in human life, family life, right? In so many different, and family life includes sex life. And there's so many ways in which that is a spiritual phenomenon as much as a physical one. In many ways, it's a key part of the book because it's so easy to see. It's much harder to see why you need family for successful finance, but it shouldn't be hard to see why you need spiritual and faith understanding for successful finance.
I think also, if I can say, one of the, I think we asked one of the most the objectionable questions we ask is about, for example, men and women earning money. And we say,
that's a good one. Yeah, right.
We're not saying the capability to earn money or the intelligence or the skill. We're saying, does earning money mean something different to a man and to a woman? And you asked about contradictions. Well, most couples we know at this time in the world are two-income families. It's to live a nice life. Most people need more than one income. In addition, both men and women have been told that professional satisfaction is a deep level of satisfaction. So I think people don't even think, do I need to earn a living? Obviously I want to have satisfaction, and society has sent the message that comes through earning a living. But what we're asking is, does it mean something different to a man and woman? And where this comes into where it might interfere, for example, with marriage is, well, what happens when someone gets a promotion that necessitates moving to another state or another country? Does it is it totally a checkbook amount? Is it a total, well, if you will earn this much more, or I will earn this much more, we go for the more money? Or does it make a difference if that offer is to the man or to the woman? And it does. I mean, in real life, it does. In most marriages, there are something other than simply the dollar amount is what is at stake.
Yeah.
And so we explore that. And that is really a spiritual issue. What spiritually does earning a living and supporting a family mean to a man versus earning a living and supporting a family mean to a woman? I think that's pretty controversial.
Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. I like what you're talking about, this elevation of the term spiritual and how we are spiritual beings, and it is a part of all of our decision making, whether we choose to think of it that way or not. And for Christians, a lot of folks, I was just having a conversation the other day, their spiritual life, as they term it, is I go to church on Sunday and then I go out to eat with some friends from church, and then I go home, and that's it. Ta-da. Did my spiritual thing, not understanding that a lot of our thought processes, like you talk about, are spiritual in nature, because we are operating on a different. We're operating in making decisions by the things that are unseen, not the things that we see, and the things that we see are simply following the decision making of the unseen. Now, you've been married for how long?
I know. Do you?
I know it's more than 30 years.
About 46.
All right. So you've got this. Some of the things
time flies when you're having fun.
So some of the things that you're talking about, I can't help but wonder if time and experience And in your relationship, if it took that time to be able to write this book, I'm wondering if you could unwind the clock and bring us back to a younger you, a less mature, less full of knowledge. When you're reading it, when you wrote this book, walk us through the contrast of you and how you came to this point of being able to write this book now, and how that would have been different had you written it,
That's
30 years
really
ago.
interesting. I'll take a crack at it, and then you can. But look, I mean, I will confess that it turns out that I was not as wise at 30 as I thought I was. But I must at the same time stress that, in my view, very little of this book is a consequence. Very little of this book in substance is a consequence of our own life experiences. It is mostly from these books behind me. It is mostly from ancient Jewish wisdom. Now, I would say, I said in substance. So the actual fact that your life stands on 5 pillars, well, that I knew when I was 30 because of the 5 books of Moses. And the fact that these are finance and family, and I knew that as well. And so did Susan. I think what perhaps, and it is a smaller part of the book, but the style, the tone, I think even though Susan pointed out a rather awkward question we raised, and there are a number of awkward moments in the book where we have to express something that is very far from a massage with warm butter. It's uncomfortable, and we do it. But that's why people are buying the book, to get the truth and the real information. So I think we probably express it with just a little more understanding of our weaknesses and the weaknesses of our readers than we might have done a few years back. But to answer your question, Jason, substantively, the book is not different from the book we would have written many years ago.
But I think it would have been more of an intellectual exercise years ago, and the real life experience, our own, and the number of people you meet along the way,
that's a good
changes
point.
it to
That's fair.
something that you say, wow, God sure was smart. Was sure was smart.
Yes.
He knows what he's talking about.
Well, because like Rabbi, I've heard you talk so many times about finances and increasing your income on the podcast and things like that. But to hear you bring that extra dimension of it, where you talk about there are some things that focusing on money alone as the sole object is a mistake, and there are things that matter beyond that. That's very nice to hear, and it's very true to what we try to tell authors as well. Look, if you're going to go into this just to make money, you may as well not bother, because you're never going to be satisfied.
You're right. We lived for a while in one of our favorite parts of the country, the Pacific Northwest. And there's a mountain about 70 miles south of Seattle called Mount Rainier. And climbing Mount Rainier, it's about 14,500 feet high. Climbing Mount Rainier is a tough challenge, but it's not like Everest. It's not undoable, and folks do it. But here's the shocking thing. If you simply go to the base of Mount Rainier and look at the top and then start right up, the distance isn't that far.
Yeah.
It's you'd be walking no more than about 3 or 4 miles, but it turns out to be a 20-mile climb. Why? Because in mountain climbing, as in life, the direct straight line approach is seldom correct. It seldom works. And I'm sure you explain that to your clients as well all the time, that there are a whole lot of things we need you to do before you can actually sit down and write.
Yes.
Or if we're going to, these are the things we have to do first. Hey, I'm impatient. I want to get to the summit. No, that's not, you will get to the summit, but you won't get to the summit your way. You'll get to the summit our way, because it is the only way. It's like,
Uh-oh.
Oh, I'm not sure what happened. All right, there we are. Are we okay?
Yep. You're back.
I want to make money. Stop distracting me. I need to get to the office. I need to get to work. I need to go to my investment club. Stop distracting me with things having to do with friendship. I haven't got time for friends now. I haven't got time for family. Stop telling me I need to get married now. No, you don't understand. You're not going to reach the summit your way.
Yeah.
Because if you are not married, there's going to be a dramatic reduction in your social connectivity. And since making money is utterly proportional to the number of people who know you, who like you, and who trust you, without a spouse, there are going to be many, many fewer of those people. So listen to me as I say, here is where you've got to focus, even though you'd rather just pick up your backpack and steer for the summit, not going to work.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I had some friends who were training to go climb Mount Rainier. And on one of our training hikes, he was saying, as we go up these steps, we want to do a couple things. Number one, we want to go so slow that we don't start sweating. Because if we start sweating, it's done. Number two is there's a rest in each step. So don't walk quickly, walk methodically, and then stand up straight. And every time you stand up straight and lock your knee on each step, you get a little rest. And you might think that's not important until you've taken tens of thousands of steps. And then you're going to want every little rest in between. And if you don't take that, you might not come back. So we want to, there are certain things that we need to measure or certain things that we need to do slowly and methodically and with thought rather than what you're talking about, just going for it. Whether that's, it sounds like, getting some things out of order, perhaps, like to your point about that woman. Certain things are out of order, and then certain things just won't come back in order at some point in time.
I hope we're, and please tell me if we're not, because we'd like to correct it. But are we adequately clarifying that we're not talking about, make sure you got balance in your life, spend enough time with this and spend. We're not doing that. We're going to something far more crucial, and that is know how to deal with your social and maybe your political or your civic life in a way that also impacts positively your family and your fitness and your friendship, your family, and know how to interact with your family.
Yeah.
In a way that enhances your financial creativity as well. It's very much a case of understanding, not that you have to allocate time proportionately and in a balanced way, but that what you do has to be done on each of these 5 things with an eye to the other 4 at all times. And that's what we're trying to provide.
Yeah.
They affect each other. You just can't keep one and say, well, this is in its own little box, and I can close that box for this year or 2 years or 3 years. It's because they all affect each other. You're going to be seeping out into each other.
Yeah, that's my takeaway for sure.
As a little story, Rabbi, I learned this from you, so I tried it and it worked. I was speaking a couple of years ago with a friend of mine. We were doing some business together. I was paying him to do some lead generation for me. And he said, I noticed that you're very open and vocal about your faith. And, it's just kind of different to me. I'm an atheist, he told me. But he wasn't a rude or obnoxious type of thing. It was just, he was just sharing. And I said, he said, the faith thing doesn't make sense to me. And I said, well, actually, if you think about it, it does. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I trusted you to generate leads for me. I paid you money because I had faith that you would help me generate leads.
That's right.
And then he said, gee, I never thought about that. And I said, you're married, aren't you? And he said, yes. I said, so when you asked your wife to marry you, you had faith she was going to stick around and you'd build a family together. Right. And he said, well, I guess so. I said, well, there's no guarantee she was going to stick around, is there? He said, no. I said, exactly. So all of these things are constantly
Yes.
interplaying.
Mhm.
And I think the example of going up Mount Rainier, I also think of Lincoln in the movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, where he says, "A compass will point you true north, but it's got nothing to say about the swamps and the chasms and the valleys that you're going to run
That's
into."
very
along
good.
the way.
Great line. Great line. Yeah.
All of this has been so helpful, Rabbi and Susan, for our authors, I'm sure, just as they think about putting their messages out there, getting them out there, marketing them. If you would like to pick up a copy of The Holistic You, we've got the website down there, rabbidaniellapin.com. And we are so grateful for your time, Rabbi and Susan. We know we've about run out of it here. So any last comments for the good of the
Well,
audience?
it's been a pleasure talking with you guys. I know we spoke a whole lot and you never interrupted us, and we appreciate that. But you asked great questions, and we love that. And the time just sped by, and I didn't even realize that we're at the end of our time available. But yeah, look, the secret, I think they were hoping to be able to provide to people and allow people to dramatically enhance their lives is by this exposure to holistic thinking. And also, the realization of how much impact the spiritual, or even the existence of a spiritual reality, that is a new thing for many people as well. So we're excited about the book, and we're excited the kind of response it's been getting from early readers.
Fantastic. Well, we so much appreciate your time and everything you contributed to our audience today. Go to rabbidaniellapin.com if you want to learn more. And until next time, this is the Emissary Authors Podcast, where we help faith-driven founders and entrepreneurs tell the stories that matter. My name is Paul Edwards. My co-host is Jason Todd, and we've been talking with Rabbi Daniel and Susan Lapin. See you next time.